Where can you swim in Florida that does not have alligators in it? Maybe your bathtub. And even then, I would still double check it. Does that mean, though, that we should never swim in Florida? I'm Cher, and I have lived in Florida my entire life. I've grown up swimming in all the swimming holes, kayaking all the rivers with gators all around me, jumping off high dives into gator-infested waters, and I am happy to report that I have never been eaten by an alligator. So I want to share, as a Florida native, where I would and would not swim to still have a good time and explore all the beauty that Florida has to offer while staying safe. So I feel like Florida is kind of always in the news, but we have had a lot of reports lately on the recent gator attacks. We have had a fatal one on the econ just a couple weeks ago, and it really is making people fearful of swimming in any body of water here in Florida and kind of questioning, can we have any fun? But let's walk through some of the common myths about alligators, such as should you run in a zigzag if one is chasing you, as well as my list of all the places where you absolutely do not want to swim. And then we can talk about the places that I think are a little less risky. Now, always know that it never comes with zero risk. So a disclaimer here, if you swim in any body of water, pretty much in Florida, especially if it's not a pool where you can see clearly that there's no alligators, I can't 100% guarantee you that you're not going to get eaten. So we're going to go ahead and get that disclaimer out of the way. It's about minimizing and reducing your risk though. So I have heard a lot of critiques, a lot of comments out there on social media, everybody just slamming the poor girl who recently lost her life on the econ and almost like she deserved to lose her life. While I wouldn't recommend swimming in that area, even for a quick dip on a hike to cool off, nobody deserves that. And do remember that she has a family out there. So that's one thing that kind of does disturb me, is some of these very heartless comments. Let's have a little humanity here, folks. And a lot of the comments, both from Floridians and non-Floridians, a lot of folks view Florida as a place where you just don't ever want to swim. And a lot of folks, that was their solution was, if it has water, it has alligators, stay out of it. Does that reduce your chances? Probably 100%. Yes. If you know that you never swim in those waters or walk near those waters, you're probably going to have a 0% chance of getting eaten. Okay, I'll give you that. But is that how we really want to live our life? Same as folks who won't swim in the ocean because they're sharks. So is the solution to never ever swim in the ocean? For some people, that's the solution. So if that's what you choose, okay, so you've minimized your risk like 100%. I get that. But that's not how I choose to live my life. Now, I will say I will never go ziplining again. That's an adventure that I have decided the risk is not worth it after breaking both of my legs in a ziplining accident. So that adventure and risk is over for me. So I can legitimize those fears from people. But a few common myths, first of all, is if it's the color of sweet tea, it is not safe, but if it's clear, it's safe. No, those alligators are in both waters. The difference is you can see them in clear water, whereas you can't see them in the murky, sweet tea colored lakes and marshes and whatnot. Well, it might be that you can kind of see them coming a little bit better. However, if they really want to come get you, they know how to hide. So you're not really at less risk of them attacking you. You just might be able to stay out of their way a little better. So it might be a little bit less risk if you're in clear water, but they're still there. I don't want you guys to think that just because it's clear doesn't mean there's alligators there. They absolutely can swim in springs where it's colder. They're still there. As a matter of fact, I have a couple of springs that are close to us I grew up swimming in. Two very beautiful crystal blue springs at certain times. Gorgeous areas, but they are completely infested with alligators. I grew up taking the glass bottom boat ride in Wakulla Springs, and there were alligators all underneath us as we went down that river, all along the beds. You will see them bathing. You'll see them swimming right by you in the boat. They're everywhere. It just means you can see them if they're a far distance from you to know to get out. But a lot of alligators are very good at hiding. They're going to be in the bushes. They're going to be in the vegetation. If they want to attack you and they're close enough to you and you don't realize it, they're a lot faster than you. You running away in the water, I hate to tell you, but you don't have very good chances. Another myth is if you just dip your feet in, like this poor girl, to cool off, just your legs, if you stay on the shoreline, you should be fine. Not the case as well. Even fishing from the shoreline, the child that was snatched up by the lake at Disney, such a sad case. And unfortunately, you think you're safe even out of the water. A couple of feet from the water, you are still not safe. If you're anywhere close to the water, that alligator can easily surprise snatch you and you're gone. Another myth I often hear is if it's fresh water, you got to watch out for gators. If it's salt water, you got to watch out for sharks. Well, it's true you have to watch out for those things, but there are still gators in salt water as well, especially if a river feeds into it. There's alligators around the beaches here all over. I have seen them down at my local beach. I've seen them crossing the road across the beach. Don't think that there's not gators at the beach as well, that sharks are the only thing you have to think about, especially if they're beaches that have a river that feeds into it, a marshy area around it, kind of swampy looking area. Stay out. And of course, there's always the myth that if you're getting chased by an alligator, you want to run in a zigzag formation. It isn't true. Your best bet, according to experts at Gatorland, is just run as fast as you can. Another myth that people think if you see one approaching you is to splash around as much as you can so that it scares them and wards them off, that they don't like splashing. Also not a good idea because it might think that you're an injured animal. It's going to be very attracted to animals that are thrashing because they're hurt. That's an easy prey. You do not want to show it that you're an easy prey. So from all these myths, that leads me to the do not swim or things not to do that increase your danger of getting eaten. Number one, do not swim at night. I know it's tempting. You want to see the beautiful Florida waters at sunset, gorgeous backdrop. Always a time that I love to go take a walk. I am a sucker for a good sunset, especially by the water. You don't want to be anywhere near the water's line at dusk. So from dusk to dawn is alligator hunting time. This is when they are most active and your risk of getting eaten is heightened significantly. Now, does this mean that during the day you're safe? Not necessarily, but alligators aren't quite as active during the day. They're actually ectothermic, which means that, they're cold-blooded and they can't really warm themselves up themselves. So they have to sunbathe and absorb the sun's rays, and they get their energy from the sun to warm up so that they can hunt and do all the things. So they kind of get a little more sleepy during the day while they're soaking up the sunlight, but then they get active in the evening, and that's when they really are ready to hunt. Now, number two mistakes to make is swimming, of course, during mating season. However, that's a little hard to avoid because mating season tends to overlap with the summertime, our warmer months. And that's when everybody wants to swim, of course. So it usually runs from like early or late April to about early September, I believe. So yeah, all of our warm months. So all of our swimming months, basically the entire summer is mating season. This is when they are the most active and they're more aggressive. So they are actively more on the prowl. They're very territorial. They're all looking for the ladies. The women are a little more aggressive. So bad time to swim, even though, I always hear this that, oh, what are you doing swimming at the peak of mating season? Well, when else are we going to swim? We're going to swim in the winter? I mean, in Florida, sometimes the winter months can be a little milder, but still I don't swim in the winter. I swim in the summer when it's hot. So I never really like that reasoning that people give when they're like, what are you doing? It's like, well, you gonna go swimming when it's 30 degrees outside? Okay, more power to you. What are you, from Minnesota? Other things I also wouldn't do, and this is hard too because we love our pets, but bringing your small dogs with you, even bigger ones, but especially small dogs, small animals, not a good idea. Alligators are very attracted to small dogs. That is easy prey. That is a lovely little snack, something they can easily snatch up in 2 seconds flat. So if you bring them with you, you're really attracting those alligators to you like a magnet and to your precious pets. So I would really recommend leave the dogs at home. Now, does that mean that I have never taken my dog out on the boat with us? No, we've definitely taken him, but we were always in a pontoon boat. We were higher up off the water a little bit. The gators don't tend to mess with us up there. I would not recommend bringing your dog with you out on your kayak, on the back of your kayak. It's like they're just luring and tempting this gator. Generally, gators don't see humans as food because we're too big for them, but a little small dog, that is a perfect snack. That also goes for taking your dog for walks along any place that's swampy, marshy, near water. That's very hard here in Florida. My whole neighborhood is surrounded by lakes here. So it's kind of hard to go for a walk out on our street and really bank on there never being an alligator around. But you especially don't want to go if you live really close to marshy lands and swampy lands and lakes, big lakes where there are a ton of gators in there. You want to stay off of those little beaten paths. If you live right at the water, proceed with caution. Try to stay as far away from the water as you can. Even water retention ponds, again, if it's wet, it has gators. I also wouldn't swim in any place that has warning signs about gators. If it tells you, warning, do not swim here, listen to it, do not swim there. Even little community neighborhood parks and lakes, like we see the fireworks at our local neighborhood lake, but it's very swampy, and there's even been alligators known to be right in there at dusk when you're waiting on the fireworks. You don't want to be too close to the water down there. So I wouldn't swim in any lake, even a smaller one, a little neighborhood pond. My husband grew up on a farm. He had a little pond in his front yard, and there were alligators in it from time to time. So even his own front yard had gators. And if you live in these areas near a little bit swampier, wetter places, you know to not go outside at night without first really looking. They could be under your porch. Don't leave your dogs out at night. They could snatch your dogs. Lots of things to think about. Sometimes gators are on our front porches in Florida. Sometimes they're known to crawl in people's garages. Always be aware of your surroundings. You want to be very careful even going fishing because, the gators, they're going to be drawn to the fish. So be careful and leery of where you're fishing from. Recently had a little boy whose hand was bitten while fishing as well. So I just really recommend if you're out taking your kids fishing, you're fishing yourself, try to find a spot where it's a little harder for an alligator to suddenly snap up out of the water and get you. Try to look for a little higher ground, maybe do it off of a bridge. Look for places where you're not right at the edge of that water or off in a little swampy path. That also leads me to my next point, which is they're not always in the water. They're sometimes out of the water. So not only do you have to worry about the swimming places, you got to worry about walking on the ground near swimming places. So think golf courses near lakes, think parks near lakes, think even, the neighborhoods like we mentioned. Again, always be aware of your surroundings. Another rule is never, ever, 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 ever feed an alligator. Never pet an alligator. Unless you're at a zoo or a place where it's designated. Never attempt this in the wild on your own. It's actually illegal, and there is good reason. Not only is it dangerous for you, but it also gets the gators where they get too used to humans and they get used to getting fed. So then they start coming around humans, and then this increases the chances of getting eaten. And anytime that these gators do attack someone, they're going to automatically be hunted down and euthanized. So you're putting the gators at risk also unnecessarily. In general, you'll find that unless it's mating season or they have been fed by humans a lot, they usually tend to kind of keep to themselves unless you're mimicking easy prey like an injured animal, like I said, or you have a dog with you that's really attracting them, or you happen to just land right on top of them, as in the case of the poor woman a year or two back who was attacked on a kayak because, they happened to go over him and it kind of startled the gator and then he attacked her. Usually when you're kayaking, they leave you alone. I mean, I've kayaked on a lot of rivers with alligators facing me. So you don't really want to fall in at that moment. So that's always a little nerve-wracking, but in general, they tend to leave you alone if you just leave them alone. Overall, that's the typical behavior of alligators. You can usually tell when they've been fed by humans. In general, I also just would not swim in a place kind of alone where it's just swampy and marshy and sweet tea colored, like I said. So having established some of the places not to swim, absolutely not to swim, and some rules and some things to think about, let's talk about the places where I do swim and that are a little less risky. Like I said, not 100% no risk, but where I usually would swim. I typically will swim in the springs where it's clear water, but I don't swim just anywhere in the swings personally. I do know a lot of people that do. I have a lot of folks I know who go swimming in our sweet tea covered rivers down here, and it's a blast for them. They jump off their boats right into the water, kind of in the middle of nowhere. That's a little too risky for my taste. No judgment to them, but a little riskier than I like to take. I tend towards springs or state parks at the lakes where it's a designated swimming area. I only like the ones though that are either really, really clear in the designated swim areas, or if it's sweet tea colored, it is a very, very busy place. So a place with tons of people swimming in that designated area. And I don't hang out around the peripheral edges. I don't take my chances and go swimming way out to the very edge at the very rope. I stay very close to the shore where there's a lot more people in between me and the ropes. So if there is a chance that a gator's going to swim on through, they have a lot of people to get through first before me, and I can outswim those other people. Now, I have a local lake though that my son and I go to all the time in the summer. It's about 10 minutes from our house. And sometimes it's really busy, and sometimes we get there and there's only like one other person there. That's when I get a little creeped out. I love this lake because it's so convenient for us. It's beautiful. The designated swimming area is fairly clear and I can see, but I can't see much beyond the ropes. And I know those gators are there because we have personally witnessed them many times, and I have actually had to get out before seeing one swim right at the rope's edge. Just minding his own business, swimming on along, but it was a little too close for comfort. So I know they're there. I've also witnessed snakes there, and I'm not a snake person. I'm honestly probably more scared of the snakes than I am the alligators. I know that's crazy, but I have a phobia. So these wild animals, they're in there. When it gets to be a little less crowded and it's only us there or like one other person, I start getting nervous and uncomfortable. And that's when I tell my son, let's start heading on out, because there's just less people to kind of alert you. And then of course, swimming pools. But come on, where are you going to swim if you don't own a pool? We don't own a pool. So we have to use the city pools, like the public ones. There's always a ton of rules. Every time there's the tiniest little glimmer of thunder in a distance, like 30 minutes away, all the pools shut down. So we never get the chance to swim because it thunders every day in Florida. And it's either the city pools or it's if you know somebody who has a pool and then you have to invite yourself over. So not always as easy to find a pool. Not to mention, it's just not as beautiful. There's so many gorgeous places to swim in Florida. And if you're sticking to a pool, it's kind of boring. There's not a really beautiful view, unless you're at a nice luxury resort somewhere with the fancy pools and water parks. But overall, I much prefer the beautiful springs and the views of Florida. There's just so much that nature has to offer here. Usually you can feel a little safer in a pool if you choose that, but the alligators are still known to get in our pools here in Florida, so always be looking as well before you jump in. Some things to look out for if you are near the water's edge. These are some tips from Gatorland that they shared on just being aware of your surroundings near the water. If you see a little hill that's raised, like a little mound, sometimes this is an alligator nesting area. You definitely want to stay out of anything that even remotely looks like a nest, because yeah, you might not be scared of cute little baby alligators, but where there's a baby alligator, there's a mama alligator. And you want to talk about fierce, that's when you're going to get attacked the most if she thinks her babies are in danger. You also want to be on the lookout for if you see alligator tracks. Sometimes you might see them in the mud from where they have gotten out of the water and are hiding nearby. That's going to alert you, as well as just very like slippery slopes. If you see something where it looks like something or someone could have made it more slick and has been sliding in and out, chances are it's an alligator. So you probably want to stay away from that little area. So a few other little grooves to look for. So those are all my tips as a Florida native, having swam these waters all my life. Hopefully that helps you. Maybe it'll save a life, and maybe it will help some of you who are afraid to get in any water feel a little braver about getting out there and enjoying the amazing beauty and nature that Florida has to offer. So if you want to continue to see more content here in Florida and lots of other places to explore around the world, you'll definitely want to stick around and pop the subscribe. Happy exploring, and I will catch you guys all on the next one. Bye.